Okay, so look, welcome. And basically this morning's session for the 2260 session in the Teacher PD series. This one's on using CSU Replay Panopto. And essentially this session is looking at the video capture software that we use, which is referred to in your I2 sites, etc., CSU Replay. That's the way we brand the product. But the actual product itself, if you go looking for it outside of CSU, is called Panopto. So we're going to have a look at that and how it's used to create audiovisual resources here at CSU. The kind of things that we look at in this session, we'll give a bit of an explanation about how the product's used. We'll have a look at some exemplars of how different academics use the product at CSU. This item really, adding Panopto to my subject, is a little bit outdated in that it's now part of every subject site, part of the shell that gets pushed out every session. So you will find it inside your subjects in the navigation bar in the left of your I2 site, but it could be hidden down the bottom so that you might need to unhide it if you were going to use that. So we'll have a look at that. I do have a user guide and also the slides for today. So let me provide both of those to you. So I'll give you the cheat sheet in the chat pod, and we'll also grab slides for today. And then you can look at those to your heart's content if you so desire. Workshop slides, there we go. All right, so we're also going to really go through the back end of the tool. So we have a look at creating the videos in subject sites, but we'll also look at where they're all stored and how people can access all of their Panopto recordings outside of individual subject sites. We're also joined this morning by Plunkett from the Division of Information Technology, and Di is the custodian, if you will, of Panopto at CSU. And generally speaking, if there's technical issues with the way Panopto is working for some reason or not working, then there's a high chance that you'll end up talking to either Di or myself about those. So if you've got problems with using this platform here today, then you've probably come to the right place, which is good. And I'm hoping at some point as well that Di might be able to give us a bit of, I suppose, her insight into the problems that she experiences commonly with Panopto users and what's going on in that space at the moment. So like a lot of these software tools, we have updates in this space quite often, and some of those can change the way the experience is for us to use it as educators. So maybe Di might have something to add in that space as well. So we'll have a look at all those things, time permitting. I don't expect the session really to go over time, so we'll get right into things. And as always, if you've got questions, etc., please pop them in the chat or come off mute and pull us up, and we'll deal with those as they crop up. All right, so look, just a word, as I was saying initially, CSU Replay is the name we give to this product here at CSU, and it's the title we give to the tool we use. Originally was for lecture capture. That was the reason we onboarded the products. We had other products before this that we used, such as Echo 360 and maybe Lectopia once upon a time. I don't know, Di, what else did we have in this space?
Yeah, I probably don't go back that far to know what's before Echo 360, really. You probably precede me in that.
Fair enough. All right, well, we'll leave it at those two for the moment. But originally, when we had lectures being given in face-to-face settings and we wanted those backed up, we had a tool that we needed for lecture capture, and that's where this sort of came from. In the interim, of course, we've all gone digital and online and used a whole bunch of other tools for creating content, and we'll look at Panopto in that light today for creating resources. So the tool specifically will allow you to capture video and build the content and distribute that content. That's what we'll be looking at it today. In your subject sites, if for whatever reason you can't see it, you can add it as a tool link to your navigation bar. And in that quick guide that I've provided, it shows you how to do that. And we'll be looking at it from two different angles. One of them being the recorder, the tool you use to make your recordings, and secondly, from the distribution side where it stores the video, where you can retrieve your video files. Okay, before I start showing you examples of how the tool's used, we usually like to ask people to consider video in your delivery or in your subject sites, for example, from 3 different perspectives. One of them is, ultimately, where do you want your video to go? So how do you want it to be available to your students potentially or not? So that's that question. Where's it going? Who's it for? How long do you want it to be there? So is it just for this session, or are you creating something that you want to use continually, indefinitely, or basically beyond the session? And ultimately, what do you want it to look like? So when it's available to users, is it something that you want them to click on a link and they open up somewhere else? Do you want it to be embedded, situated inside learning materials, for example? So when we ask you about what do you want it to look like, I don't mean, well, I want it to look like video. It's whether or not we want it to be something that people just click on as a link, or do we want it to actually be an embedded resource? Because depending on your answer, you might get advised to go away from using one product or another. And often in this space, the question that we're getting these days is around Zoom, for example, which is a platform that everyone's getting a lot more familiar with and allows you to make video, and CSU Replay, the choice between the two. So if I look at each of those 3 questions and say, well, where do I want the video to go? I want it to go into my learning materials. Immediately we can say Zoom is not going to help you because you can't embed Zoom videos at the moment inside your subject materials. So there's one use case for using CSU Replay. Yeah, a video announcement, for example. Oh, that's a tricky one. So you could put a link to a Zoom video, to a Zoom recording into an announcement, same as you could a link to a Panopto recording, but embedding it into the announcement is a tricky equation. We might look at that one specifically, Asta, as well, because there are some caveats to that. So you can put a video from CSU Replay into an announcement and embed it, but they're only going to be able to watch the embedded video from within the announcements area of the subject site. So they can't actually watch it through their email, for example. They would need to open up the subject site to view that video. All right. So let's have a look at some examples. And I've got a list here in the slide deck, really, of ways that CSU Replay is being used. For example, in assessment scaffolding, whether or not they're showing people how to go through a particular process or procedure. So in this case, in the pathway subject, they have it used for enrollment in subjects, pre-recorded concept lectures, scaffolding assessment, providing feedback for assessment, orientation, getting used to subject sites. There's a whole bunch of different examples. So I'll just show you what some of those look like. So in this subject site, for example, they provide guidance to the students in their assessment folders around how to do particular text types, how to approach particular tasks. And what we find is that the academic has recorded slides and they are narrating. So there's no video here of their headshot, for example. So this will be voice, a screencast with voice narration. If I play that for a moment. There's the headshot.
Don't worry about being right or wrong. It's the struggle, it's the process of trying to think this through is what helps you become a more critical thinker. There won't.
Okay, so what we can see here is the academic is actually going through parts of the subject outline, the breakdown of an assessment task, and is narrating that process, talking through it. So that's obviously an element of teacher presence, if you will, that they're providing to the students. And the students looking at this embedded Panopto video are able to either play it back, download the file, open it in full screen, play it faster if they want to, which is becoming a thing that I never really knew about, but apparently all the kids are doing it, as they say, playing things at faster speeds. Maybe it's the digital equivalent of skimming and scanning. Have you heard of that, Di?
I've started to see that, yes, that a lot more of that is happening where they skip through, go
Yeah.
faster on it so that they're not having to listen to it slowly. They can just, get
I
through it
saw
quicker.
requests from some students for recordings being able to be played back at double speed so that they could get the gist of it. I'm like, that is a new one for me. But the tool does allow you to play it back.
Yeah, Lachlan, they do this to me as well. So they speed up my lectures.
So maybe part of the session should be dedicated to coping strategies for us upon hearing this, that they want to hear us in dual time. Yeah, it's that is interesting, but you can certainly do that with this tool. When we embed Panopto in i2 as well, there's a chevron at the bottom that we can open. It's not overly used, but it does allow individuals to add notes to different recordings. And that feedback will actually end up going back to the academic. If they click on this email, it gets posted to where the video was originally created. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen comments put in there. They can be disabled, but that feature is a part of the embedded Panopto videos. I'll show you how to retrieve those in a bit. So in this subject side, they have done a number of these procedural videos where they're unpacking a particular task or activity, and they've either got slide decks that they're talking through, or they're looking through something like a PDF and talking through that. So a screencast embedded. In this case, in the pathways subject, they actually take students through the student portal and the process of how to enroll in subjects. So again, screencast. It's very popular use of this tool is either creating screencasts where they're capturing the screen and narrating the process, or no screens and just a talking head, for example, at which case it becomes obviously a narrated recording, but without, I suppose, a visual stimulus apart from your face or your head. So I'm sure there are use cases for both of those things. In this subject site, it's a bit older, this subject, but the way that the academic approach is preparing for each session is they have pre-recorded narrated PowerPoint slides for every session, essentially, concept lectures or lectures, pre-recorded, all put into their CSU Replay folder for the subject. And then the students access those through their learning materials. But all of these have been created in advance, and they are PowerPoint decks that have been captured in Panopto, and the students access those through the replay folder. What else have we got going on here? More assessment scaffolding. That one's in YouTube. Padlet, here we go. Here's an embedded replay recording by the school librarian. Again, about how to approach particular aspects of an assessment. So a lot of assessment scaffolding we've seen so far. In this case, we have feedback to the cohort after an assessment, and this usually crops up when you have subsequent or progressive assessment. So one assessment and the feedback from that assessment then informing the next assessment, for example. Quite often you'll see this type of cohort level feedback about common mistakes and errors and things to pick up on, what good answers included, what poor answers, demonstrated, that sort of thing. But by and large, for the academic to create a resource like this, there's usually a subsequent activity, for example, that's going to get value from providing feedback between linking one task and another. So, and this one being called feedback feed forward, it indicates to me that that's what this is being used for. What else have we got? Very common use case for recordings and orientation to the subject welcome. And I see this done probably equally in Zoom as well as Panopto, but when it is embedded, again, it usually will go into the getting started area of a subject site. It'll be the academic recording a screencast, welcoming the students to the subject and taking them through the interface. This is how I expect you to work through this subject. This is where you're going to find X, Y, Z, subject outlines, assessments, all that kind of stuff. And I'm probably preaching to the converted here because this is a very common use, probably the most common use I would suspect for Panopto being used and embedded within subject sites. So we have a few examples there of CSU Replay Panopto being used. And in fact, if we have a look here, you can see that in this subject site, the academic has Panopto underneath their subject community area, and it's hidden from student view, which to me says that they're using it to create videos and then they're deciding where they want them to be. But they don't want the students just going in there and having a look at everything that's in that folder. So that's a decision that you'll need to make basically about how visible you want your replay folder, if you want students to be able to see everything in there, or if you're going to provision it to particular parts of the subject site, into your learning modules, into assessment areas, into getting started, at which case hiding or unhiding the folder is a decision you'll need to make. Yeah. Di, from your experience, hidden or unhidden, most common?
It's a mix of both. The only thing with hiding it is sometimes if there are access issues, what happens is I2 syncs up when someone clicks on that CSU Replay link to go to Panopto and say, oh, they're part of this group, and I'll add them to it. So sometimes that happens quite seamlessly without that link needing to be there, but occasionally when we do have access issues, that's an easy way of fixing it, just getting the student to click on that link, not even having to go into the video that way, but clicking on that link, and that just connects up their access to Panopto. So that's probably, I guess, a downside of not having that link available to students, because the minute they click on it, their access all works fine.
Okay, so that's if videos have been stored inside a subject level CSU Replay folder. We're going to have a look at the difference between subject level folders and your own personal folders, for example, shortly. But what Di's talking about now,
can I just mention, Lachlan, that's what I do, exactly that. So I have my lectures from last year as backup in that Panopto folder. And if I have problems with Zoom, which I have because of technical issues, then I'll use that, pull it in as a backup.
Right. And so that you've got those videos sitting within a folder that you used in a previous session.
Yep.
And then when you start a new session, are you then importing or pointing to that folder again in the new session?
I pull them in from the previous year because I know they get deleted, right? You only keep them for a year or so.
Di, would you like to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, look, previously that was what happened, but we're actually changing the way that we store Panopto videos. Rather than making people copy them over every year, our preference would actually be that we have a master folder, and then you can just repoint that folder each year and they are kept permanently.
Oh, that's great.
And then
such a relief.
Yeah, and then you manage. So I haven't, since I came into this role, I haven't deleted anyone's videos, even though last year we did mention we were going to do it, because I could see from running a report, there were still people accessing videos back from quite some time ago.
Right.
So that's what we're moving to us having a master folder for a subject, that instead of creating extra, by copying every session, we're actually sort of shooting ourselves in the foot, because we're taking up that storage space by copying the video over. So that's meaning that we have to delete videos from the past.
Okay.
So
if
we're not having to do that process, so we are looking to move so that you're just repointing your folder each session to this master folder rather than copying them over each session.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Now, Di, would I be right in thinking if Scott was interested in getting more information about getting a master folder set up, that he would log a DIT Sherwell request asking for a Panopto master folder, and he would ultimately be connected with yourself probably?
Yes.
And that can be arranged. So that is that's the official process, is my understanding.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So look,
thank you. I will do that.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, let's keep the wheels rolling. We've moved across from our exemplars. I'd like to take you through the actual interface for using the tool, just relatively quickly. so we can have a look. Assuming that you have a CSU Replay folder inside one of your subject sites, I'm going to open it up from, I've got it in an org site, but it works the same way. CSU Replay, here we go. Right, now a few things to point out when we're looking at this view. This is an integration of an external tool. And so really this is connecting your login with your account in that tool somewhere else. So that view that you're seeing is a window into your account somewhere else. And if we have a look through, I suppose before we get into the individual videos, it's telling me that currently I'm looking in this folder, a sandpit folder, which is effectively the subject sites folder for this. But I can click the drop down and it will actually give me a view of all of the folders that I have access to, for example, in Panopto. So I have others, I have test folders, I've got other subject folders, for example. If we look underneath my folder, we'll see that I have a bunch of these subfolders inside that. This will make more sense when I show you the back end of Panopto in a minute. But the point is that you can always have a look at the top area inside CSU Replay and make sure you're in the right spot for where you want the recording to be stored. Over towards the right-hand side, we have a few options that affect the whole folder. Okay, before we get into individual video settings, over here we have settings that apply to the whole folder, including share settings, if we were going to give someone a link to the folder, statistics on the use of items inside the folder. We actually have folder settings, which will include how we set up assessment folders in Panopto, and we'll have a look at that in a bit. But we also have this lovely RSS button over here, the radio waves. And if you get the link to this, you will actually be able to give that to students and they could subscribe to your CSU Replay folder if you're inclined to do so. So there's quite a particular use case there. If you had a folder that you created for a specific purpose, like a lecture series or podcast series, whatever, you could then provide the RSS feed to that folder and give that to the students. And then they could listen to every new item that gets added into that folder on their podcast playback application like Spotify, iTunes, etc. So this tool does allow you to create subscription type folders, and that would be the way that you go about it. But I'd suggest if you're interested in doing that, reach out to me and we can work through how to do it. It's certainly achievable. You just got to follow particular steps, as in firstly creating a specific space where you're going to add those things and then getting the RSS link and providing it out to the students. What we can see in here in the folder is that I have a number of subfolders inside, and adding those is as simple as clicking on this add folder area if you wanted to add another one for a specific purpose. This is distinct from the idea of adding an assessment folder, which is, you can see here, I've got one labeled Assessment 1. Now, what I'm actually going to do, when I click on individual folders, you see these menu items have changed a little bit, but I can go into the settings cog for that folder and see that inside each of them, it gives me the option to create an assignment folder. So a difference between the term assignment and assessment. When Panopto talks about assignment folders, it's talking about a special folder where students can upload content to that folder. They cannot see any other students' contributions, only their own, and you will be able to retrieve those videos. So only yourself and the student can see videos added to that folder. It's not integrated anywhere else, but what it does allow you to do is create a submission point for students with audiovisual content. So if you have a task that you give to students where you require them to either create or upload a video that they've made, this is a way that you can do it, a storage space for it, but you'll need to create the assignment folder for that to happen. So if I did that in here, it's created it. It's called Assessment 1. It just adds the word assignments in brackets afterwards. And if I close this, we'll see that there it is. So if you're ever not sure whether you have an assignment folder or not in place, look for the word assignments in brackets afterwards in those square parentheses there. That's going to be the spot that you give to students to upload their videos to. And if you wanted to get rid of it, you would go into the assignment folder and across to the settings again. And right down the bottom under manage here, we're able to actually delete that. And we can get rid of it. So you can add and delete folders and subfolders inside your CSU Replay folder. You just need to know where to find those individual items. Now, let's go through the process of creating a video in Panopto. And that's done through clicking this big, lovely orange button up here. It gives us a few options. I'd point out that the most common use here is probably going to be the first one, Panopto for Windows, or the Mac version, the Mac equivalent. And that will open the Panopto application itself, the recorder, and you can start making your video. But there are some other options. There's a browser version if for whatever reason you can't install software on the device that you're on. You can launch it in a web browser, and it's it was a light version that allowed you to do some of the functionality that you could do in the full recorder application. Do you know whether there have been kind of improvements or updates to that browser version? I usually steer people away from it.
Yeah, no, it's still pretty basic, Lachlan.
Okay, right. So let's stick to using the application itself, Panopto for Windows, unless you are on a computer for whatever reason you can't install software. This option is when I was talking about students uploading video into Panopto folders, this is how they would do it. You can click on this upload media option and drag in video that has been made somewhere else. So maybe that was made in Zoom, for example, or maybe it was on a mobile phone, whatever the case. If you have a video file on the device, on a computer, on a mobile device, you can upload it into Panopto folders using this option. So that was create and upload media. That's the way to get it in. Those are the two we're going to focus on today. So I'll launch the recorder. It gives me a prompt. Do I want to open it or do I need to download it and install it? Okay, if you have never used it before, you're going to need to download it at least once. But for now, I've done it beforehand, so I'm going to click on open. And it's going to launch the Panopto application for me. And what we're looking at here is the recorder interface. It's telling me it can't start my webcam, and that's because I'm using it in our Zoom session. So maybe what I can do, if I click OK, we'll have a look at the breakdown of this interface, the recorder interface. I'll make it a bit bigger. Okay, starting from top left, it's talking about primary sources, so video and sound. Video meaning webcam. In this case, I've got the one that I'm looking at you with in Zoom, and I also have the one that's in my laptop. So I might choose that for a moment, and that's over there. And you can also choose no video, of course, by switching to none, which I might do. Then we get into the audio part, so your headset. And this is quite a common mistake, I suppose. People are not sure why the sound is either not working or not as loud as it could be. If people are using laptops, more often than not, you'll find that they might be pointing just to the laptop's internal speaker rather than a headset. So make sure you've got the right device selected. In this case, I don't want my webcam sound. I want my headset sound. And when you're talking, you're looking for the green bar to be going up and down. So that's capturing audio. Then we have a quality setting, which really I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, getting into quality. I personally generally have it set on ultra personally, because I'm not worried about how big the file is. That's not my problem at this point in time. If a file size is a problem for you and you're putting your videos somewhere where you have a storage issue, then you can reduce the size of the file down to high or standard. But I personally, I've always capture things as ultra. Another consideration really is the size of the screen. I'm using these fairly large monitors. I have a couple of monitors in my office. Screen size is big. The number of pixels is big. The resolution is high. So if I'm going to capture those and not have them look terrible, I need to improve the quality. So I normally set this on ultra myself. So you can get passable recordings, but if someone was going to try and play back the recording in full screen on their device, ultimately you probably want it to be ultra for that to be nice and clear. Otherwise, they might need to view it just on a smaller media player. The capture computer audio option underneath refers to any sound coming through the device. So even though it's getting my headset audio here, if this box is unticked, the only sound that's going to be in this recording is me speaking. Maybe that's what you're after. But some people, for example, if you were having a conversation with someone online and you were recording that, the only way you would get their voice and not just your own, so whatever was coming through your headset for your speakers, would be if you checked this box. So it just depends what sound inputs you want on the recording. Then we get into secondary sources, which is what else are we capturing? In this case, I'm going to capture my main screen, or maybe I can switch to my other screen, which is where our Zoom recording is. And if you want to get a look at what that looks like, there's a preview box down here. So over here, we can see a whole bunch of things. I've got Windows Explorer down there, and I've also got our Zoom window and things happening over there. So this is my second monitor. So that's fine. I'll capture that for a second for our recording. But you can choose multiple sources if you want to capture those. I'd say probably don't do that until you get very, very comfortable using this tool. Capturing multiple video secondary sources, multiple screens, multiple inputs, comes up with an end product which is quite unusual and requires you the viewer to actually click between different playback streams and things. It's a little strange. So you need to be very familiar with the product and your end result if you're going to be doing that. Some people using this tool, however, will just record PowerPoint slides, and this will open the PowerPoint application and allow you to walk through a particular slide. But to be honest, I've always found that way too confusing with Panopto. For me, I just have it playing on my screen and I capture the screen. It just seems to be the simplest way to work through that. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to capture a screen. I'm going to capture my voice narrating it at the same time. No video. I'm going to hit record. I'm getting my timer up here. So that's going. It's now capturing everything that's happening on this screen as a video or as a screencast. If we're being specific, it's capturing what's going on the screen. I can either pause that recording and keep going when I'm ready to, or I can hit stop when I'm finished. So I'm going to do that now. On the spot, I get the option to either trash it and go again, or I say that, yep, it's fine. I'm going to hit done. It then brings up, I suppose, a run list or a job list of jobs. These are ones that I've obviously stopped and started in the past and just kind of left there. But I don't really need this dialogue anymore. So I'm going to close the recorder interface and close this prompt. So I'm back in my subject site inside my CSU Replay folder that I launched the create from. And what I can do at this point, if I refresh, I'll just hit F5 to refresh. It will now show the most recent video, even if it's processing at the top. And it's dealing with that file at the moment. But you'll also get an Outlook confirmation when the recording is done. And I've got one of those. And it looks like this. All right, so it'll tell you your video is ready, and you'll have the option to either play it back, to edit it, or to share it directly from the email. So if that's one way of letting you know that the video is finished being processed, or you could come back into the folder and access the file. A good hint is if the thumbnail is visible. once the thumbnail's there, then you're probably ready to start doing things with your video file. One of them is you can click on it. It'll open the recording in a new browser tab. It adds a CSU disclaimer at the start. I'm getting my timer up here, so that's going. It's now capturing everything that's happening on this screen as a video or as a screencast. Okay, so it's got my video ready to go. Do you notice that my mouse that I was using during the recording has a little yellow highlight on it? That's a function that not everyone knows about with this tool. If you want your cursor to be highlighted whilst you're creating your recording, it's actually really easy to turn on. I'll show you how to do it. If we go back into our settings, I just have to remember where I find this option. I don't think it's under folder settings. I only figured this out this morning. I feel like I've forgotten already. There's a basic and an advanced settings section die, and it has the mouse cursor in there.
Yeah, it's something I haven't seen before, so I'm learning with you.
I'm just trying to remember where it is. It might be in the recorder settings itself.
Yeah, I would think it wouldn't be folder.
Let's try the recorder itself. Open the recorder for me again. I just want to find it because I get asked about that aspect sometimes because people are used to it with things like Screencast-O-Matic, for example, used to highlight.
Yes.
All right, if we have a look in settings, this looks better. Right, when you open the Panopto interface, click on settings. The one that I'm particularly interested in is right down the bottom. Highlight the mouse cursor when you're doing a screen capture, and it will give you that. It'll highlight wherever your mouse is moving. You can turn that on. It's off by default, but you can turn it on.
I was just going to ask if that was off by default. Okay, thank you. Yeah,
it is. If that's the best thing you get out of today, then I'm happy, because a lot of people don't know about that one, or they're more than familiar with the tool itself. Have a look through some of those other settings, but the other ones that were on by default look pretty standard to me. Okay, so look, we have our recording. It's sitting inside our folder. We have the option to click on edit at that point. It will open the recording inside a browser tab, but this is the edit view, which will show you the recording here. Underneath is the continuum, which will have the video file and the audio track underneath. And at this point, if we make sure that the scissors icon is lit up, it is by default, you can then click and drag in different sections of your recording, and it will actually crop those out of the recording. Highlighting them is part of that process, but to remove that section from the recording, you need to click on the apply button, and then it will republish the recording. Okay, so that's pretty much as complex as editing in Panopto gets. It allows you to work through parts of the recording. Once you decide, I really hate the bit that's at 5 seconds in, you can play it back here. Anything that's happening on this screen, oh, I hate that part. You go, right, highlight that, and that will be cropped out when you actually click on apply. So you don't click anything else other than selecting the area that you want removed, and then you click apply. If you make a mistake with the cropping, it's not set in stone. You can always revert back to the original version of the recording. It's kept in the background, if you will. But if you apply and provide the link to this recording or where it's embedded somewhere else, it will show the most current version. So it will retain those edits. And if a student was to download the recording, it would keep that the edited version, so they won't get the cuts. And that's a difference between Replay, for example, and Zoom. Quite often, Panopto's the Replay is the only tool that we have access to that will allow us to edit video permanently. If you're familiar with the Zoom process of editing recordings, it's just a superficial cropping that if someone downloads the file, it's not included. They get the whole thing. Whereas in CSU Replay, if you make an adjustment and apply, then the downloaded file is the edited file. It's a permanent change. unless you as the owner come back in and revert the file back to its original form. Looking inside the editor, we also have a couple of other options. Over on the left-hand side, what we can do is also look at things like captions, and you'll see that the recording is finished, but it's already added auto captions next to my voice. So when people play back this recording, they're going to be able to click on this CC button, close captions, and get that as a video while
as a screencast.
I'm talking. If we're being specific, it's capturing what's going on the screen. I can either pause that, and that will be a part of also where I embed it. The captions will be available. If you can't see the captions, come over here in the editor to the captions area and select import captions, auto captions. Otherwise, you can go through a process of manually adding captions, but I don't know many people that are willing to go through that process. Other parts that might be interesting to you in the recorder include being able to add quizzes to your video recording in Panopto. This is obviously based on the assumption that you're going to do more with your recording, or you want it to be used for longer. You can select where you want the quiz to happen, but let's make a quiz first. If I click on add a quiz, it asks what type of question would I like added to the video, and I can choose between true and false, multiple choice, multiple answer, which they're calling multiple select, or a close activity, fill in the blanks. And then we can add those quiz types into the video and decide whether students, for example, can't progress the video until they get the answers right. You can set up those sorts of behavioral activities inside your videos if you want to, using the Panopto tool. That will only apply when it is embedded or played back. Am I getting this mixed up, Di? I remember that the video, the actual quiz only works when you play it back in Panopto, I think. I don't think it applies when you embed the tool.
If they open up into full screen, it does, but what they've got to be done is signed in. So if the student, sometimes they've gotten navigated to the video without having to go through i2 and sign in. So they will just see the video and the quiz won't display. And they'll know whether they're signed in or not is in the top right-hand corner. They'll see a sign in or log off button. If they don't click on that sign in, the quiz doesn't display. So it just depends on how they're navigating to whether they've signed in as to whether the quiz displays or not.
So if they're in their subject site, it's a fairly safe assumption they're signed in.
Yeah.
So that would be okay. But if we sent them a link to a video that we'd made, then there's no guarantees.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you. All right, so you may want to have a play around with the quiz aspect of Panopto, and then you can decide at what point in the video you want to drop the quiz in or stop them. Have a play or get in touch with me if you want to have a look at making a quiz together. I'm happy to help with that. I would point out that I've noticed, I'm not sure if this has always been here or not, but there is a normalize audio function that I don't think used to be inside the editor. And the way that works in other applications potentially is if you've got parts of your recording where the volume is very loud, either other people speaking and they're really loud, or you've captured audio or media from somewhere else and it's much louder than your voice, or your voice is much louder than it, you might be interested in using a normalize audio option, which will compress all of the sound so it's roughly about the same decibel level. It's an interesting one. All right, I'm aware that time is racing away from us. So what I would really like to look at, if we go back to our original video, is how we provision this video to other people. And you do that at each level by clicking on the share button. At the moment, it's just sitting inside my replay folder. But if I click on share next to each video, down the bottom, I'm prompted with a question about who can access this. At the moment, anyone who has the link is the setting that I'm using, which means if I clicked on the link button and then copy link, I could then provide that to people in an announcement or elsewhere, like I have in the Zoom chat there, and people would be able to play back that video. The other option is clicking on the embed button. And underneath that, we have the ability to copy the embed code. You'll see that there are some settings underneath about how we want the embed to display, to behave, showing captions or not, for example. I leave those with the default kind of options. But if I now go into another I2 area, maybe this will do. Any I2 area where you can add content. And if I went to build a new item, we'll call it a CSU Replay Embed 1. If I click inside the editor, I've gotten some embed code, which means I need to click on the code view, which is this button. And then I can Control V to paste that and hit save. And now my video is now embedded within the subject site. If I hit submit, it'll be added right down the bottom as the newest item. So there it is. It's adding the disclaimer automatically. And we have a video ready to go for students to either download, etc. So that's ready. The other way that you might be familiar with, if I build another content item, CSU Replay Embed 2, is that inside the editors, we also have a mashups button or an additional functions button over here on the right, which is for adding other types of content. And this is connected to, amongst other things, like your content collection or local files. If we scroll down, it's also connected to Panopto, which is the other name for CSU Replay. So I can click on Panopto video here, and it'll ask me which library do I want to choose from, which folder. At the moment, it's looking at this subject site, and there's my video. So I can click on that and insert, and it will do exactly the same thing. So you don't have to know about the code necessarily and copy the embed code. You can also find any of the videos from your Panopto library by clicking on that plus button and navigating to them. So 2 ways to distribute it via embedding. And then next to each of those videos, once they're in a subject site like this, if we have a look at some of those other subjects, you're also able to get statistics on how often the video is being used. So I'm just going to find the CSU Replay folder. Here it is, CSU Replay. So all of the videos in this subject site, for example, will have those same buttons next to them that allow me to edit the video, share it, or if I want to have a look at the statistics, the stats. I click on the stats button. It's going to give me the ability to have a look at how often it's been accessed over a period of time. You might need to configure that so that you're looking at when it was, last 90 days, for example. I'm going to have a look at any time, forever. So this is telling me that in 2021, for example, was when the session that this was obviously provisioned. So we're looking at April, May. So it sounds like a 30 session, which makes sense because it's a 30 subject site. But we can see that the views and downloads are captured here. If we scroll down, we can also have a look at which viewers were actually looking at the video and how long they were watching it for. And you're also able to export these stats. So if you need to know which students within a subject site have been watching your CSU Replay videos, firstly, you're going to need to make sure that they can only get to it through the subject site. Don't give them a link from somewhere else. Make sure that they have to go into somewhere in the subject site in the first instance. And then you will be able to get the statistics on who's watching and accessing that video through your CSU Replay folder. Okay, so it's quite specific steps that you need to follow there. Di, I'll stop there for a second. Did you want to weigh in on any of what I've been saying so far?
No, I think you're covering everything really well, Lachlan.
Excellent. All right. I think what I want to kind of head towards as we approach time really is the back end of Panopto, using the back end. We've looked at making videos inside our subject sites and through our CSU Replay folders, and how we share those, how we edit those, etc. But what I'm interested in at this point is showing you that behind all of this, not looking at CSU Replay just session by session, we also have what's called the back end. Now, basically, this is what sits behind everyone's accounts, all in the one central place. And you get to that by navigating to this address, csuaupanopto.com. I'll put that in the chat as well. And when you go to this link, you might be prompted to sign in. In fact, you probably will be prompted to sign in with your i2 login. And what this is going to give you really is a view of all of the videos that are stored in Panopto that you can see. Can everyone see everyone's videos, Di?
No. You
Okay.
can only see those that have been shared with you, so that you've either got access to because you're in that site, or they're public, or yeah. So it's only depending on the settings as to what you can see. Right.
So because I'm someone that has access to a lot of different subject sites, I can see a lot of videos that have been added to those sites, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyone that if you get added as an instructor or full staff, etc., to an IS2 site, that will then flow through to this view, all the videos that you can see. What I'm particularly interested in this space is the fact that not only can I create videos in the back, I can also have a greater level of control over my videos through my own central folder. And if I click on my folder, we'll see that inside my folder, I have a lot of subfolders that I can either add more to by clicking on add folder here, or I can also click on the create button and add another folder that way. There's two ways to do it. But inside each of those, I have a folder that I know is not going to be touched or deleted, etc., that is central, that I can store my video content. And for you, it might be as simple as creating one of these for each subject that you're delivering, and maybe subfolders inside those for your different purposes within that subject if you need to. But this effectively is one way of thinking of a central storage point for your videos. Now, when you create master folders, Di, can you sort of unpack that a little bit compared to using a central my folder?
Yeah, look,
location?
I guess the issue with the my folder is that it's connected to that person's user. So if that person leaves the university, we don't know where those subject sites and where all those videos are stored. It takes us a lot to find it, to actually get access to that folder, because it is that person's individual folder. And as we know, anything that we create for the university is the property of the university while we're paid for the university. So those videos can be used moving forward if required, especially if they don't have faces and stuff like that. So by having a master folder, it allows us to actually store everything at subject level, and then can be shared and managed and moved and deleted. And because we no longer are looking at deleting videos at subject level, which is why people move to using their my folder to protect from that, we're sort of then negating the real need to come here, unless there are personal videos yourself that you're wanting to create and keep in that sense. If we are looking at subject stuff, we'd nearly prefer to move to using the master folder as the key area for storing any of those.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think I would probably add to that in a way by saying, if you're looking at creating backups of things for yourself, then you've always got this central spot, your my folder, that you can add things to. But the other great thing about coming into the back end like this and working with videos is that you also have the ability, once you click on those individual videos, to make copies of them and move them around. So what that means is, if you've got a master folder set up for your subject, you could copy videos that you had created or had ready to be provisioned into those different master folders. So let's say I've created a video resource that is valuable in 2 different subjects. If I've created it here in my folder to begin with, I can then copy that and provision it to both of those other subject sites. Right? I have the ability to move them around as long as I've got access to them. You just got to choose which folder they're going into. So if I was saying, well, actually, inside these different subject sites that I have access to, so here's a bunch of them, I could say, oh, well, I want to stick it in there. I want a copy of it inside this paramedicine subject, and then I can copy the video. All right, so you can absolutely duplicate, move around video files through the back end very easily. It's almost impossible to do from the subject site level, from the front end of Panopto, but coming into the back end, you can absolutely move videos around, video content around quickly and easily through there. So I do find it quite useful for that particular use. So again, it comes back to that question of what kind of resource are you making? Where do you want it to go? How do you want it to be provisioned? It's another one of those initial questions. Now, look, I am aware we are at time. So look, I'll point you towards the files, the slides for today. Towards the end of those slides, I've got two slides. One is a few bits of advice around making Panopto content. And I'm actually going to have to update this now, Di, because we don't do a purge anymore. And their files are relatively safe by the sound of things. But yeah, do always think about whether or not you want the resource to be used ongoing or just for a single session. As I mentioned before, screen sharing and playing back PowerPoint, PDF, browsers, whatever is probably my recommended way to use the tool rather than trying to capture PowerPoint directly. I've always found that a little too fiddly for my liking. It's the main use case for using Panopto is to add direct additions to your content site, embedding. We looked at a couple of ways of doing that. I haven't played around with the webcast tool in about 6 months. You may see that button mentioned inside CSU Replay, and it's talking about making a live video recording, but at the same time you get a link. I would suggest we have a far better tool for doing that, Zoom. That is a live streamed way of getting other people in and making a video at the same time if you choose to do so. Exactly what we're doing in this PD session. And look, the last slide that we have there is a link to some resources on using Panopto CSU Replay, including the cheat sheet from today and the links to the different parts of the university that support Panopto, so DIT and DLT as well. All right, so look, I'll stop the recording there, but thank you for coming out on a Tuesday and listening to me talk about Panopto at you for a while. I'm happy to hang around for a minute if you've got any other questions. And a big thank you to Plunkett from DIT for joining us as well.
Anytime.
Thank you, Lachlan. Thank you.